"Hi, are you still teaching college out in Riverside County?" And I said, "Yeah. Who are you?" He says, "I was in one of your classes. I just saw you and I wanted to thank you because I decided to apply for LAPD because of you." And I walked out of there just so proud. The retirement job was absolutely the capper to my career. That was the best job I had on the department. It's obviously a career of service, but servicing your employees is just, it's a very special feeling.
Today, we got a real law enforcement insider in the studio. Meet Peter Harris, a seasoned professional whose journey began in the United States Air Force and took him through the ranks of the Los Angeles Police Department. From patrol officer to internal affairs investigator, Peter's career spans a myriad of roles, giving him a unique perspective on the complexities of law enforcement. Stick around because Peter's diving into the nitty-gritty of internal affairs investigations. You ever wonder how investigators and command staff can view the same incident in totally different ways? Peter's got the stories. One scenario involves a simple human mistake seen one way by investigators, but interpreted as something much darker by command. It's a roller coaster of emotions for the officers involved. But that's not all, because Peter also spilling the beans on situations where internal affairs becomes a battleground for personal vendettas within the department. Imagine being the internal affairs investigator caught between doing what's right and towing the department's line. It is a tough spot, and Peter's got the inside scoop. So, if you're into behind-the-scenes tales of law enforcement drama, hit the play button, give us a thumbs up, and let's hear it from Peter Harris himself. Ready for some eye-opening stories? Welcome to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Let's go. Okay, Peter, thank you for coming here. I really appreciate it. This is a little special knowing that you were, we just got done talking about it, you were like my second month out of the academy, and you can actually tell the truth how, I suppose, good of a probationary officer I was, or maybe I wasn't, but we can save that for our conversation. Try not to laugh as much. We're going to try to have some fun here, but well, let's get to it in the show here. So here we go. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, please rate the importance of internal affairs in a police department and why.
I have a little hard time putting a number on it because to me that question is kind of subjective. It kind of depends on the department. I would think if you have a smaller department, smaller agency where everybody's kind of doing the right thing and doing what they're supposed to be, the emphasis on internal affairs is probably not going to be quite as great as a larger agency like LAPD or LA Sheriff's, someplace that just statistically, because of the sheer number of employees that you have, you're going to have people that are doing things that they're not supposed to be. So it's hard to put a number on it, but the importance comes in when we take into consideration that in the United States, we have a constitution. And because of that constitution, that essentially places the emphasis on the rights of the individual as opposed to the government, we have to abide with that constitution and we have to police within that constitution. So it's a really important thing for an agency to not only investigate misconduct of their employees, but to monitor the conduct of their employees.
Yeah, and does that conduct, in your experience, we're going to get into this. You worked in internal affairs. We actually worked in internal affairs together. Do you feel this, the importance? It's pretty high, knowing that you have to really weed out some bad apples, if you will, if there is any bad apples. What do you think about that?
Well, you absolutely have to weed them out because people who commit misconduct become a cancer within your organization, and that cancer will grow. If you have someone who's committing even just small acts of misconduct, that can lead to bigger things.
Right.
So it's really important to, like I said, not just investigate those incidents of misconduct that do arise, but to monitor your people on a regular basis.
Got it. So based on your answers, I'm going to give you an 8.5. You're my first guest that hasn't really given it a scale, if you will.
First one who deferred.
First one who deferred. I like that. Let's go with, you know what? Do me a favor. Finish this sentence for me. As an internal affairs investigator, my job is to what?
I always felt that my role as an investigator was to be a protector. And when I say that, I don't just mean protecting one thing. There's so many variables to an investigation. You're protecting the integrity of your organization, but you also have an obligation to that employee that you're investigating to protect them as well.
Right. And in terms of duties and responsibilities, as you move forward, and here I am, and I come to you and say, "Hey, Peter, I'm like this new investigator in internal affairs. What am I supposed to do, or what's the first thing that I should do?" Or,
well, like a lot of your other guests have already said, you're a fact finder, and you're to go out there and you need to conduct a thorough investigation, and it's not just for the protection of the agency, but it's for the protection of the employee, because the fact of the matter is that probably 80 to 90% of the time, we are the employee's best friend, because we go out and we can prove to everyone that they did what they were supposed to, or maybe something happened and they just made a human mistake.
True. And in your experience, because I know you were an internal affairs investigator, did you find as though a lot of the allegations made by the public, if you will, right, were adjudicated as, or they came back, for the lack of better terms, they came back like it didn't happen, or it was unfounded, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think we had a very high number of investigations that came back as not resolved that shouldn't have. And somewhere along the line, the investigation was lacking something to actually come to a resolution one way or the other. A lot of the time, we lost it right in the intake.
Which leads me, and sorry to interrupt, which leads me to a really good follow-up question. How important is an intake?
That is the most critical part of an investigation there is. And the intakes are usually done by field supervisors. And, a lot of them, unfortunately, they'll go out, they'll get the bare minimum of information that they need to complete their intake, and they'll do their face sheet and ship it off to internal affairs when there was video they could have got, there were witnesses that could have been identified at the time, and many of them just feel like, well, I did what I was supposed to, I've completed my intake, it's internal affairs' problem now. But they're doing their employees such a disservice by doing that.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of it has to do with you would think maybe training. If that
training's a big part of it, but I think a lot of it is that a lot of these field supervisors, they're uncomfortable in the role.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's almost like, as a police officer, how many traffics did you do doing patrol when you worked patrol?
Not many.
Okay.
At all.
And it's why?
Because I didn't come on the job to be writing tickets.
But,
that would be my...
Well, when I mean traffics, I mean traffic collisions.
Oh, yes.
How many collision reports did you do?
You know what? I can probably even count them in my hands.
Right. And the reason is because you're not comfortable with them.
Correct.
And so with the intakes with a field supervisor, when he goes out and he's kind of in a role that he's uncomfortable with. So he wants to get it done and get it over with, and I fulfilled my obligation, now it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that obligation, goes with a little bit more than what you would think? It's just, hey, let me just kind of take a little bit of information, fill out the general information, and ship it off.
Right. Well, I've even got a little story in relation to that. When I was a supervisor in Hollywood, I got a supervisor request one night. It was about 2 a.m. at a nightclub, and I pull up, and my 2 officers, their police car is in the center of the parking lot. The suspect is in the back seat of the car, and they're about, I don't know, 10 or 15 feet away from the car. They're watching him, but they're not in the car, and it's kind of a cold night. So I walk up, and I'm like, what are you guys doing out of the car? And I go, that guy just won't shut up. And I go, well, what do you have? And he says, well, he came into the parking lot, he was vandalizing cars, and he tripped over one of the parking blocks, and he fell, and he cut his head open, and so he's bleeding. And I go, so what's he going to say when I ask him that? And the officer goes, oh, he'll tell you the truth. That's what he told us. So I went over and I opened the car door, said, hi, I'm Sergeant Harris. What happened to your head? And he goes, oh, that big dumb bald cop over there did it with his baton.
Okay.
So at that point, obviously I have an intake.
Yes.
Now I could have just said, all right, well, I'll just do the face sheet when we get to the station and leave it at that. But that would have been doing a disservice to them because I knew that they weren't lying to me.
Right.
So I went and found all of the bouncers at the club and all of the valet drivers, and I interviewed them all on tape right there because 2 weeks from now they may not even be working there anymore.
Right. It's crucial.
So once Internal Affairs got the investigation, all they had to do was interview the accused, and they're done. And it comes back.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. How many sergeants do we have in LAPD? Well, it's got to be what, 800 maybe plus? Yeah. Too bad. We would hope that 800, right, more would get those type of nuggets. Those are lessons learned. Because you're absolutely right. I think at the intake, and I do this when I teach at Savage Training Group, where we say, hey, lock them in a statement and do, no stone goes unturned.
Correct.
And
it starts there.
Exactly. So by the time they actually get to Internal Affairs, and even if Internal Affairs handles, because you and I both know in this big machine, they determine, hey, if it's this serious, maybe this stays here in Internal Affairs. And if it's not, then it'll go back to the divisional level.
Right, as a chain of command.
And a chain of command, and then give it to a sergeant, and he or she will go ahead and investigate it. No, good point. I appreciate all that. And, well, let's get to the second segment here. Trip down memory lane. Look, let me do this for you because I know a little bit about you. Let's see, Academy in January of 1990?
Yes.
You missed 1989 by
2 days.
By 2 days. Was there an academy in 1989? I mean, I'm sorry, a class?
There were lots of classes in 1989, but I wasn't in them. But, it would have been nice to be able to say, hey, I came out on the 80s.
Let me. Did you get a letter, or how did that happen? I'm always curious to know.
How did I get hired? Or?
Yeah, how did you get that one letter that said, hey, welcome to the LAPD, you're appointed to this class?
I was an out-of-state applicant, and it's interestingly, I came out here to test for the sheriff's department.
Okay.
And they have the accelerated testing just like LAPD did. And I came out and I was unprepared and I failed their oral. So while I was in LA for the week, because I had planned to be here for the week, my brother-in-law at the time said, you ought to go down to test for LAPD. He says, you'd probably be better off in LAPD anyway. I go, why is that? And he goes, well, the sheriffs, they're not as refined. Let's just leave it at that. So I looked it up, and they were doing testing at Wilshire Station. So I showed up on a Wednesday night, and I took the written test. That night, everybody who passed the written test were then given an oral date. I went up and told them my situation. I said, I'm actually from out of town. I'm leaving on Saturday. And they said, well, how's Saturday morning for an oral? I said, well, that's great. And I'm thinking, I just failed the sheriff's oral. How well am I going to do on this one? And they said, well, I think it's Thursday or Friday, one of those 2 days. We have an oral interview seminar I think it was at Parker Center.
Okay.
And so I was like, well, I better take advantage of that because, learn from your mistakes. And I went to the oral interview seminar, and I went in and I prepared mentally for the oral, and I took my oral at City Hall South and flew out, and then about a month or two later I came out and finished up my testing, and
packed your bags,
and here I am. Yeah.
Packed your sea bag. Well, you're Air Force guy.
I'm Air Force.
No sea bags.
No sea bags.
No. Yeah, well, I packed my sea bag and came onto the job myself. So you joined LAPD in 1990. I got to ask you this: riots.
Yeah.
Right. So 1992. Okay. When it went down, where were you?
I was in West LA in 1992, and I was on a TO the night the verdict came in.
So it's like, were you on like on a day off, or they
know,
gave you a day off?
It's a comp, using my comp time.
Okay.
And of course, I got a phone call saying, yeah, that TO would forget it. You got to come in.
The city's burning down.
So at the time, I lived right around the corner from my partner, and we were carpooling. So he came over, we jumped in the car, down we came. We got to West LA. They put us in a patrol car, and they said, go forth and do police work. And so we left. We came upon a big 415 group in front of the Federal Building down on Wilshire Boulevard, and we started calling for backup. A couple other units arrived, and a sergeant arrived, and he said, "Oh, these guys, they'll be fine. I just went and talked to one of the organizers here, and everything's and we're going, Sarge, they're going to go to Westwood. They're going to go and they're going to take out Westwood." And he's like, "No, that they assured me they're going to stay right here, but just stay here and monitor them." 10 minutes after everybody left, the group starts marching towards Westwood. We start, of course, put out a backup. And that night we had a skirmish line because they went into Westwood, started breaking windows. But I'm convinced that we saved Westwood from being burned that night. So
you and your partner.
Well,
how many units?
Because it was a big skirmish.
Okay,
line.
So it was
we had a lot of people show up for that.
You say the city, well, yeah, LA, Westwood. You say probably UCLA a couple of dollars from not tearing it down and burning it down like the whole city did. Okay, let's see. You became a field training officer in 1997. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, and then a sergeant in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are as a sergeant. Told us about when you were in Hollywood. You were a sergeant, and you went into internal affairs in 2008. Is that correct?
Yes, and I went to internal affairs from Hollywood. My involvement in the discipline system actually was a little bit reversed because I was the complaint coordinator at Hollywood.
Okay.
And it was a job that I didn't want, that was thrust upon me. But when your captain calls you in and you're an old school military guy and he says, "Hey, I have a job for you," you say, "Yes, sir," and you perform it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, no, totally.
So, and it was absolutely the worst job I had on the department. Hollywood is consistently number one in complaints in the city. It's just everybody is a "don't you know who I am," and everybody wants to complain in Hollywood. So Hollywood has a very high volume of complaints.
And if I may interject, ballpark figure, I'm just curious.
They're running probably between 500 and 600 complaints a year. Okay, so that's a lot to coordinate.
Yeah.
And I was actually an OIC of a complaint unit. I had two subordinate supervisors who were investigators.
Okay.
I had a couple of civilians and a P2 and that was all to keep that paper mill.
Yeah. The little machine
running.
Yeah.
And
a police officer, a civilian, and two sergeants.
And we were constantly under the gun. We were constantly, "Hey, Sarge, this complaint is it's running statute, and we have to serve the officer." I literally have driven to Oxnard to serve an officer. I drove to Idlewild to serve an officer who was on vacation. It was constant, and it was from the time I walked into the door to the time I left it in the evening. It was nonstop, go. So when I saw that, after a year of that, when I saw that there were 7 openings at internal affairs, I thought, you know what, I'm putting in my paperwork. I'm going to get my rocker and do less work.
Right. Yeah. A little bit of upgrade. Get paid 5.5% more. It's like an upgrade, kind of like a promotion, saying, "Hey, you're
Right.
fit and qualified to do this job as a internal affairs investigator." It's kind of like a bonus.
Right.
And you go there, and I take it your workload went
Way down.
dramatically down.
Yeah,
I was going to brag because I was a complaint coordinator myself before I retired at Transit Services with the NPA, but no, nowhere near. I think I inherited almost 100 on a one-man show, but I feel your sentiment. From the minute I got the minute I got to work to the minute I left.
During
it's
that
just
time, I was
nonstop.
actually writing all the LOTs too. So
Yes, transmittals and findings. That's got to be. It's a lot of work. Okay, so then, and we'll talk about this later on too. In 2017, you left and you became the retirement coordinator.
Correct.
A very important job. We'll get into that. I know that there's this component of that job regarding your carrying your concealed weapon, and we'll have a little talk about that because not many people know what that entails. So we'll get into that. But without further ado, let's go. Let's talk about some cases that you worked or you were involved, and I'll leave the floor up to you and just kind of tell me a story about internal affairs.
There's so many.
But I know you and I said, you know what, we're going to go from this to just this. And
There's so many, and there's a lot of them that are very interesting. But one of the aspects that, and we talked about this before, turning the cameras on. One of the aspects is the difference between being an investigator and being an adjudicator, and sometimes you don't always see eye to eye.
Correct.
With what the adjudicator may see. And one of those incidents that I had, and I'll kind of set up the scenario for you, is I had an investigation involved a motor officer down in South Traffic, and I want to start out by saying this guy's a good cop. Some cops are mediocre, some really aren't good. This guy was a good cop, and he was conscientious, and I really believe that he was always out to do the right thing. And I didn't know him personally, but I knew him by reputation. But he was driving southbound on, I think it was Western, when he observed a vehicle turn into a parking lot. And when the vehicle did that, it cut off a bicyclist who actually had to change his course to avoid a collision. Mm-hmm. So he has a violation. He stops the driver of this car, finds that the driver is driving on a suspended driver's license. And they decide, he and his partner are there, and they decide to make a physical arrest for driving on a suspended license.
Okay. So
they arrest him, impound his vehicle, and they take him to jail and book him, and everything seems to be just fine. And now I have a question for you. The whole time you were working patrol or you were out writing citations, anytime that you did anything with a driver's license violation, how many times did you ever go to court on one of those?
Not many. I don't think I can recall on a 12500 California Vehicle Code, which is driving with no license, or I believe it's a 14601.
Correct. Yeah.
Which they say suspended license. In the many that I've done, which wasn't that many. No, I haven't.
I was a ticket
appeared.
writer. I liked writing tickets.
I remember that.
And
I do remember that.
I wrote a lot of 14601s. I wrote a lot of 12500s. I towed a lot of cars. And I can't remember one time I ever went to court on a license violation.
Me neither.
Well, he got a subpoena for this violation.
Okay.
Which, I'm thinking, when you got the subpoenas, you should have told you something was wrong then. But anyway, he goes, he sits down, he gets on the stand, and the defense attorney starts asking him questions, and he lays it out just as I have said, and just as he put in his report. The defense attorney starts asking, well, which way was the violator driving? Which way did he turn? He testifies that he was driving northbound, and he made a left turn into the parking lot.
Okay.
And that the bicyclist had to actually remove his feet from the pedals of the bicycle to avoid the collision. Then the defense attorney produces a video. And the violator was not driving northbound, he was driving southbound. He was in front of, driving the same direction as the motor officer, and made a right turn into the parking lot. But there were cars in between him, which obstructed his view. And the video shows that the bicyclist did have to veer, but his feet didn't come off the pedals. And so the defense attorney, in pure defense attorney fashion, kind of starts saying, you're lying.
Yes.
It goes back and forth between the defense and the city attorney. They have a discussion in front of the judge about this, and the judge makes a ruling. And I also have to say that the officer said, I was wrong. I made a mistake.
An honest mistake.
An honest mistake.
Yep.
My view was obstructed. This is what I perceived. And the defense attorney didn't want to let it go, but the judge finally told him, look, the officer made a mistake. That's my ruling. Move on. Okay? So after and I don't remember, I think they dismissed the citation based on the inconsistencies, which happens. And the officer felt so strongly about what happened. The very next day, he went to his captain, and he told her what happened. And he laid it out, and he explained everything to her, and she said, that's fine, you made a mistake, don't worry about it. Well, in the meantime, the violator now comes to Internal Affairs and makes a complaint for him perjuring himself on the stand.
Okay, I was going to ask who the Blue Falcon was.
So I get the investigation, and it was one of those, it doesn't happen all the time, but occasionally we'll get somebody who will make a complaint and refuse to be interviewed.
Okay.
Which I've never understood. You make this complaint, you want us to investigate it, but you won't cooperate with me, but
right.
it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I interviewed the city attorney, I interviewed everybody that I could there, and then I interviewed the officer. And I am totally convinced he made a mistake. I even called his captain and asked her about, hey, did he come to you? She said, yes, absolutely. And I says, well, what do you think of this? She said, hey, he made a mistake. We're allowed to make mistakes. It happens.
Yeah.
So I wrote it up. I even had a discussion with my lieutenant about it, asking, do you think he's going to be okay with this? He says, oh yeah, it's pretty obvious he made a mistake. I think he'll be fine. Now, in the meantime, there's a change in command at South Traffic.
Okay.
So once I turn in my investigation and it goes up the chain and then it comes back down and then it goes over there, it's a different captain who's looking at this investigation. And he sees my investigation and he says, guilty on perjury. He's guilty for false statements, and they send him home, take him off his bike, and now he's looking at a board for termination.
Wow. Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
I have another question of you now, because
yes.
I'm gonna ask you to put on your advocate hat.
Oh, I'm glad you did, because I was just getting ready to chime in.
How many times as an advocate did you put on a board when you did not call the IO to testify?
That's a very good question, because sometimes I didn't want to call the IO.
And why not?
Because sometimes I got cases where I felt that not every stone was turned, if you will. And I was going to use a little sense of humor and say that this particular captain you're talking about obviously didn't take my course. Probably, I don't know, maybe he wasn't probably even probably never worked internal affairs. One, two, or, and I guess I'm just speculating here, or was even a board member at a Board of Rights. I don't know. But without that being said, you have to have the IO. And the reason why I say that, I know where you're going with this, is that because you and I have had one where, yeah, you're my material witness. You're an investigating officer, specifically when it comes to false statements. We're talking perjury. Mm-hmm. That's serious. And I don't want to take too much away from your story, but now we're not talking 51%, bro. We're not talking preponderance. Well, it is preponderance. It's a standard of proof, but we need to crank that up as much as we can, because now we're talking about the livelihood and terminating an officer. And yes, an IO definitely needs to be next to me. And guess what? You're going to testify and tell the board members how you actually framed this allegation and why.
I didn't even know that board occurred.
Wow.
And it was probably because I vaguely remember having a conversation about it, saying, "Well, the guy made a mistake. It's silly. I don't know why they're sending him to a board of rights."
Okay.
And in a board, it's kind of like a trial, but the rules of evidence are different.
Correct.
So
They're very loose.
So you as the advocate, you get to ask questions, and the defense gets to ask questions, but the board gets to ask questions too.
I'm curious, how did you find out that he went to a board of rights?
Facebook.
Wow. Wow.
When he beat his board, which I knew he would,
Okay.
it was put on Facebook that he had gone to his board and he won. And like I said, I knew he would, and I was ecstatic about the fact that he won.
Right. Not guilty.
Because, right. But I feel to this day, I feel like I failed him.
Do you have any reason to believe why he himself, the accused, this motor officer, didn't call you? Or did he even know that he could call you to testify?
I don't know, and I'm sure that he left that up to his attorney.
Yeah. Wow.
And his attorney probably thought, we have such a strong case, we don't need him anyway.
That is such a disservice.
But if I had testified and the board had asked me, well, what's your opinion? I would have said, he made a mistake. I don't know why we're here.
Yes, and that's part of the problem. I shouldn't say it's not so much that it's a problem. The challenge and the uphill battle, and you and I know this about the culture, and we'll get more into this, is the fact that sometimes you get cases that just don't even merit. It doesn't even merit the fact that we're going to spend 3 or 4 days with 2 command staff officers. I understand we voted to do a civilian board, and we can get into that later on, but traditionally you have 2 command staff officers and a civilian, and we're spending all this time and effort, and more than anything, we're putting that accused employee through, you and I know this, a board. My guests in the past and my future guests are going to tell you that it takes forever. It takes a long time, man. You feel that, you're in a dark place. You're in a dark place, and before I forget, it's part of mental wellness. We don't talk about it enough, and we should be doing more about it now. Right. We're talking about what, 10, this had to happen 10, maybe 12, 13 years ago or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate to say, and again, I'm speculating here, but I don't think things have gotten better with the process. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox, and we'll talk a little more about that. Let me ask you this in terms of this particular case. Where do you think that we failed in terms of the process?
I want to give the commanding officer the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
Because my first thought was, he's more worried about his own career than he is this poor cop. He's afraid of making the wrong decision, or what will be perceived as the wrong decision by the people above him, who could affect his getting his star.
Right.
But that was my first impression. I don't know if that was the case, because I wasn't in his head.
Right.
But I would hope that he would take a lot of time to really reflect on the decision that he's about to make, because he's about to impact not just that officer, but everyone around him, his family, all of the officers at his division, because they're all going to hear this. Right. They're all going to hear it. They're all going to know, and it's going to impact them all. So the reflection, and I was thinking about this the other day, a detective investigating a crime will get advice from a district attorney about, do I have it or do I not?
Right.
And is there a reason why a commanding officer couldn't go to the lieutenant in charge of the advocate and say, what do you think of this case?
Yes.
If I recommend that this guy goes up for a board, what do you think? Do you because I would think that a lieutenant would look at that and go, this is a loser.
Absolutely. It's a failure, like you said. what I was trying to get to, it's just this whole machine. It's this process. Someone, and I can tell you as an advocate that I would go to my lieutenant and say, you know, well, we don't have it. We don't have it here. Look, I've done 30 plus of these border rights. 5 of them have been terminations. 5. And everybody's, you know, wow, that's, yeah, I get it. They're bad apples, they're bad actors, they got to go. But the question you should be asking yourself is, what happens to those other 25? And that's what we're talking about, is that the quality and the fact that somewhere in the chain, somewhere in these levels and this whole procedure, no one would bother to catch that. And I don't know if that could be just, I suppose, a lack of focus, or maybe you care, maybe you don't, or someone should have caught it. And what happens is that residual effect is even worse, which is why, the perception is so bad, right? I mean, we've been around since 1990. I got to guess who's been around even longer. And I've always wondered, this is one thing I wonder, I've been retired for a little over a year, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because that stigma. And this kind of example is probably the reason why. Mm-hmm. And that's in a big, big machine. Imagine in a small agency. Like, if no one really caught it, that's really gonna
have an impact.
Absolutely. You have another one that you can share with us that would help kind of shape a little bit more about some takeaways from this process?
Yeah. I have another interesting case that occurred. And I'll have to kind of set this up. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. There was a lot of moving parts on this, but we have a captain who came into a division, and like any good manager, he came in and he started looking at all of the procedures and everything that was being done in his division. Now, one of the things that he looked at, which rightly so, he absolutely needed to, was the station fund. Now, station fund complaints, we get a lot of them. And they're always a pain, because station funds are really not run like they should be. Right.
So we don't have a teller, or like a teller window.
We don't have a CPA who's actually doing all the books, and
And can you kind of set that up for the audience?
Station fund? Every station has a fund, and it's for all the
candy,
miscellaneous stuff that divisions do. Okay.
Cup of noodles, candy, and
that plays a part, because they had a station fund, but then they also had a snack bar fund.
Got it.
Okay,
so there's it's both.
Right. Well, and the captain says, well, wait a minute. Why do we have a station fund, and why do we have a snack bar fund that are separate? There are regulations in place that say it's all got to be one station fund.
Okay. Fair enough.
He's absolutely right. He was absolutely correct, and he needed to do something about that. Now, we'll call him Sergeant Accused. Okay. Sergeant Accused is running the snack bar.
Okay.
And he's got a key to a box that, the guys, it's all honor system. You come, you take your candy, drinks, whatever, and you put the money in the box. And now he'll come and clean the money out of the box. He goes to Costco. He replaces all the stuff. Everything's good.
Hunky-dory.
And they were actually using that money from the snack bar to pay for the cable bill, going into the station. They were... the grounds around the police stations are supposed to be done by Parks and Rec, and they never come. So they actually hired a civilian gardener to come and and they were paying him out of that fund. And so the captain calls a meeting of the station fund committee, and he has Sergeant Accused come as well. And he says, okay, we need to revamp this whole thing. Yeah. Everything needs to be done under one. So I need you, Sergeant Accused, to give the key to the box to Sergeant Station Fund, who is the head of the Station Fund.
Okay.
Right.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. So after this meeting, Sergeant Accused and Sergeant Station Fund, they get to talking, and Sergeant Station Fund really doesn't want to have to deal with the snack bar stuff.
Okay.
So he says, you know what, keep the key. Just keep doing what you're doing, and then bring me the money and the receipts and all that. Okay.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Now, sergeant accused ends up getting hurt and goes IOD.
Okay.
All
So
right.
he puts a workers' comp claim in because he's hurt on the job, and he leaves.
Correct. He's off getting treated
Got
for
it.
his injuries or whatever.
Okay.
In the meantime, of course, now he's not replenishing the snack fund, and everybody's kind of wondering, well, why is everything, so.
How come there's no cup of noodles?
Right. Where's my cup of noodles?
Where's my cup of noodles?
So the captain looks into why isn't this happening. He goes to Sergeant Station Fund, and Sergeant Station Fund says, well, Sergeant accused has the key, and he's off IOD, and I can't get into the box. And the captain's head explodes.
Okay.
All right. I told him, I ordered him to give him that key, and that's it. So he calls internal affairs. He says, I've got a problem with this sergeant. I want an investigator down here right now. And my lieutenant comes in and goes, you get to go down to this division and talk to this captain. And
So you're working internal affairs.
I'm working internal affairs.
Okay.
And so I have an intake to do.
Yes.
Right. I knew I was in trouble when I got down to the captain's office, shut the door, took out my recorder, and he goes, oh, we're not doing that. But a recorded interview is mandatory. Oh, we're not doing that.
Okay.
Okay. You're a captain. I'm a sergeant. I'll do what I'm told. And then when I went back to my command, my lieutenant's like, well, he's a captain. So what it really boiled down to is the captain, really didn't like sergeant accused.
Okay.
Okay. And I did my investigation. I interviewed all the players involved, and I interviewed Sergeant Station Fund, who is the one who told me about the conversation that they had, and he told him to keep the key. So when I did when I wrote up my investigation and I sent it through, it essentially said that if we're framing allegations against sergeant accused for insubordination, you're going to have to frame allegations against the other sergeant as well, because they conspired to not follow the captain's order.
Okay.
The captain didn't like that.
I'm curious to know, did anybody call the Sergeant Station Fund and say, hey,
Well,
can you please give us the key while you're gone? We need it.
I don't know if they were unable to get a hold of him. I know that they eventually broke the lock off the box, but the point is that the captain was pushing the insubordination against sergeant accused when all they really had to do was go, okay, look, I told you guys what to do, and he should have asked Sergeant Station Fund. And I don't think Sergeant Station Fund ever told the captain that they had that conversation, because in that intervening time, Sergeant Station Fund had gotten promoted to Sergeant 2.
Okay.
And it was my understanding that he and the captain were friends. So I don't think he wanted to go and tell him, hey, look, it's on me as well. I don't think he really wanted to do that.
Right. No accountability on his part.
Correct.
So it's kind of like two Blue Falcons instead of one.
Well, to me, a Blue Falcon is somebody who's out looking for it.
Yeah.
To me, I think it was, maybe the captain was looking for it. I think Sergeant Station Fund, he could have squashed the whole thing if he had just gone on and said, hey, look, calm down. I did this. But no, they went after him with a vengeance. I know they benched him for a while. He was not allowed to go out in the field after he came back from being IOD. And his defense rep, Caesar Mata, great guy. Caesar got him an admin transfer out of there. It was like, you obviously need to get away from this guy.
This guy.
And everything kind of calmed down. But I just remember my lieutenant coming in and saying, hey, I got this 15-2 captain from down there wants a reinvestigation or a further investigation. I go, there's nothing more to investigate.
Right.
What else am I going to do?
Right. That 15-2 is a interdepartmental correspondence.
Correct. It's
like a memo.
A memo to,
I like that.
And thankfully, that's just a request to Internal Affairs. And if I remember right, my commanding officer sent it back saying, yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
Can you tell us what the outcome was? Or do you remember what the outcome was?
I don't know what the outcome was. I saw that.
Border rights.
No, it didn't come down to that.
I'm joking.
I saw Sergeant accused later on at his new division.
Mm-hmm.
He was obviously doing just fine. He was sitting in the watch commander's chair. So,
wow.
But it's just, did we really have to go there? I mean,
that's one of hundreds of IA stories that that could be shared, have been shared, and will be shared as more guests come on, especially with our big machine. And for the purposes of the show, you know what? I'm going to let the audience figure out what a Blue Falcon is. I'm certainly not going to interpret what it actually means. I'm sure you police officers out there and whoever's in this law enforcement career can kind of figure that out. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing all that. For me, what do you think what are the lessons learned besides the fact that
the biggest lesson learned there is that the two examples that I shared, I really want to say, are not the rule. They are the exception. I mean, these are not the things that occur on a constant basis,
right.
At least in my in my experience.
Right.
They come up occasionally, but there are people who are within. They're in a position of power. And,
yes.
And they take advantage of that.
Yes.
And it's really sad that those people are not ever held accountable.
Very, very good point. Look, it's almost as simple as this. If I was a commanding officer with a situation like this, let's go down the line. I mean, what is misconduct, right? Is it neglect of duty, fail to do something? Okay, what are we looking at? Well, you failed to give the key of a
He was pushing it as insubordination.
Right. So that would be kind of like Cuba. Conduct unbecoming. Hey, you know what? I gave you an order, and you didn't abide by that order. And that order, on a scale of 1 to 10, we're talking about station funds, where in fact you can probably call and say, hey, man, can you tell us where this key at? And chances are we would have never even had an internal affairs investigation.
Or even still, just they ended up cutting the lock off the box anyway. So cut the lock off, take the money out. You don't want him dealing with the snack fund anymore. Yeah. That's fine.
And he's not even there.
Put somebody else in charge of it because Sergeant Station Fund didn't want it either.
Right.
Right.
NOD, neglect of duty, violation of policy and procedure. Well, there's really none of policy or procedure as it relates to station funds, right? Criminal offense? No. And last but not least, your CUBO, right? Conduct of becoming an officer, which in insubordination kind of falls under the umbrella, which is kind of like a catch-all. But, I mean, if we're looking at the bigger picture...
It became pretty obvious it was a personal vendetta to me.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because I do talk about that a lot, where somewhere in the levels of review, and as I think things start at the divisional level, okay, it's sustained. Just give them an official reprimand, what we call a paper penalty. And by the time it gets to the 10th floor where the chief is at, with all these hands in the cookie jar, it ends up like at a board of rights. Or I've seen something start, well, direct them to a board. This is really serious misconduct at the divisional level. And by the time it gets to the 10th floor, after all these hands in the cookie jar, no, just give them 2-day suspension. What's the big deal?
Right.
And it just, it goes to the, parity, unreasonableness, and try to be fair. And those are the lessons learned. Well, hey, thank you for sharing that, Peter. Okay, let's get to this worst and best moments in your career. I started doing best and worst, but I don't want to leave on
a bad note.
No. And it's always like this radio call that happened. But let's go with the worst and tell me something in your career that you experienced.
I've been watching your episodes, and it's very interesting to hear. Most of our worsts are pretty similar. It always has to do with animals or kids, and that's probably because we really perceive them as true victims.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a radio call as a P3 in Foothill. I was working day watch. Don't remember who I was working with, but it was a was an ADW in progress, an assault with a deadly weapon in progress, a group beating one at the scene of a traffic collision. So I screamed over their lights and siren, got there, and there was a traffic collision in the intersection, and there was a group around one person. When we get out, they're really not beating him when we arrive. We find that he was the driver of an ice cream truck who had center punched a minivan in the intersection. And it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and the driver of this ice cream truck is just completely blotto drunk. And when he center punched this minivan, in the passenger seat was an 11-year-old boy who I'll never forget. He was still in the seat, eyes were open, and he was obviously dead. And I'll never forget it.
Yeah, it's and we see the worst in the world, and when it comes to this particular part of the episode, it reminds me of a lot of things that we see the worst, and I thank you for sharing that. And the average person doesn't get to see that, and for those of you who are out there who want to get in this type of career, you need to know this is something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. Here we are.
It will stay with you forever.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, here we are 30 plus years later, 25 years later.
And of all the scenes that I've been to, all the homicides, all the suicides, that's the one.
Yeah, no, totally. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, Pete. Okay, let's go with best.
Best.
Besides me being your trainee, which I know I wasn't, I think I was, well, you passed me, unfortunately.
That's because the envelope you kept. No, I'm kidding. No, you were a good probation. We had a good time.
Yeah, we did.
So I don't know. I didn't even know if you know this about me. For about 10 years, I moonlit on the department as I was a instructor at Mount Senecino Community College in Riverside County. I taught criminal justice classes at night there. I usually had 1 or 2 classes a semester. And I did that for about 10 years. And it's interesting because it's out in Riverside County. And one of the things that I always did was the first night was always the get to know you night. And I would go around the room. And one of the questions that I made everybody answer was, why are you here? I always wanted to know, what are your goals? What is it that you're hoping to get out of this class? And I used to hear a lot of, I want to work for Riverside PD, or I want to work for the Murrieta Police Department, or one of the agencies in the area. Occasionally I'd get LAPD, but not that often. It's usually these kids, they grew up out there, and that's where they wanted to serve. And so one day I'm working internal affairs, and I was assigned to Criminal South. The entire 8 years I was there, I pretty much spent the entire 8 years at the same desk. Some guys, they come in, I worked admin, I worked here, I worked SOD. That wasn't me. I just, I came in, I did my job, and I went home at the end of the night. And I wasn't really looking to move around. Somebody wanted me to work workplace at one time, and I said, no.
Now we're good.
Thank you. So I spent a lot of time at Southeast and 77th.
Okay.
A lot of time down there. And I was at Southeast Division, and I was walking down the back hallway of the station, and I hear, Sergeant Harris. And I'm like, people don't usually call my name when I'm down here. Usually they see me walk in the door, and it's like, boop, they all duck to other places. And I turn around, and I see this young P2 walking up to me. I haven't a clue who he is. And I'm in a suit. I mean, it's not like he saw my name tag or anything.
Yeah.
I'm in a suit. And I look at him, and I go, yeah. And he goes, hi, are you still teaching out? Are you still teaching college out in Riverside County? And I said, yeah, who are you? He says, I was in one of your classes. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't remember you. And he goes, no, that's okay. I understand. You have a lot of people that come in and out. He says, I just saw you and I wanted to thank you because I decided to apply for LAPD because of you. And I walked out of there just so proud.
Yeah, no, totally, man. Moments like that, are rare, for that matter. Pete, you know what? I got some parting words. Let's see. I do remember when I got to Foothill Division, you used to take me to this one particular donut shop that we always hung out, and I'll never forget. You used to tell me, look, we might not get into a use of force, we might not do this and that, but one thing that we'll definitely try to do is get into a pursuit. Because you like pursuits. Who doesn't like pursuit? Who doesn't want to chase some bad guys that just got done stealing a car or whatever the circumstances be? And of course, you got me all hyped up. I also wanted to thank you. Take the time now. You got married, and you actually invited me. Hammett. I didn't even know where Hammett was until I met you. I knew it was real far, and I took my niece to your wedding, and that to me just kind of made me realize that, you know what, I think it was me and Sabra.
It was.
Me and Hyson were the only two, and you've been an FTO. You have all these probationers, and you and I bonded. I think one of the reasons why is because I was 30 years old, and you were just. I'm not going to say older, but we were around the same age.
Pretty close. Yeah,
and I remember you making a comment like, look, if you're here to start another career, another chapter in your life, we were able to bond, as opposed to someone who's just 21, 22, which I did. I had a classmate that just deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. So
it's like a cat bouncing off the wall.
Exactly. I appreciate all that. Thank you for teaching me and guiding me in my 25-year career. You and I definitely met back in internal affairs, and we did have a border rights where I was the advocate and you were the investigating officer.
That's a story for another day.
And that's a story for another day. There was a false statement, and we can save that. And last but not least, and before I forget, I do know, and I think this is very, very important, just share real quick about, as a retirement coordinator, I know, believe it or not, when I was in retirement, here you are. You're the person who basically got all this process done for you to retire from the LAPD. I know part of your duties and responsibilities has a little bit to do with CCW, which everybody like, oh my God, carrying a concealed weapon, that's so important. Can you kind of share with us a little bit about that?
The retirement, and I have to say this as well, the retirement job was absolutely the capper to my career. That was the best job I had on the department. I was so honored to be able to serve our employees in that capacity. Just the fact that I was able to do that, it's obviously a career of service, but servicing your employees is just, it's a very special feeling. But yeah, as the retirement counselor, they call it the retirement counselor. I always hated that name because I don't counsel anybody with anything. I would help process people out, and I always called it a retirement coordinator. But you not only are processing people out of the department, but you have 10,000 retirees that you have to service as well. And we all get an ID card, and as long as we were retired honorably, we get an ID card. And that ID card normally says CCW approved on it, and that has to be maintained as well.
Yeah.
And I always used to joke that, well, my internal affairs is coming in handy here because our guys still get in trouble after they retire. Now, a lot of our guys will go, after I'm retired, the city can go to hell. I don't care. It's if you care about that CCW, you really, they still kind of have a hold on you.
Might want to abide by some rules.
Right. The penal code says that they can revoke that CCW for anything that would be considered misconduct. The department, if you tell somebody to go F off and that's discourtesy, they're not going to pull your CCW because of that. but we will pull it if you get arrested.
Got it.
So what usually would happen is we would get somewhere along the way, we would get a notification that there was an arrest or some type of a prosecution on someone. And that's also why every 5 years when you renew, you have to get your fingerprints run and everything, because a lot of our guys are getting arrested in Texas and other places. So we would revoke that CCW, and it's not like, well, I have gone out to actually take ID cards, but that was
that's got to be
that was
an interesting.
We had a retiree who got arrested not once but twice. He got arrested by the LA County Sheriff's Department, and we sent him the demand letter for his badge and his ID card back. He never sent it back. And then he got arrested by the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, and he was in lockup there. And when I found out he was in lockup there and they had his ID, I drove out to get it.
Yeah, it's not serious business.
It is a serious business. And there are ways to appeal that decision. You know, a lot of our people, they're retiring in lieu of termination, and they're retiring under less than honorable circumstances, and they're not getting their badges, ID cards, and all that kind of thing. And there is a CCW hearing that they can request. And when they do that, I am the department's advocate.
There you go.
For those hearings, and I'm not really like the advocate section.
Right.
All I do is I take all of those, the evidence that I pull together, all the police reports and everything, and I just present it to the board. And when I present it, it's just, here you go.
Yeah. Make a decision.
They read it, they talk to the appellant, and then they make a decision.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, hobbies. You're a writer. Telling me a story.
I'm an aspiring writer, I guess you could say.
I love it.
Yeah, I've written a novel. It's in editing right now.
Okay.
Which I'm finding that I really enjoy the writing. The editing is not so fun. It's like work. But you know, it's something that's got to be done, and you know, it's a hobby. It's not anything that I ever expect to see any money from or anything like that, but it's kind of fun. So yeah, I gave you my manuscript.
Yes.
I'm hoping that I'm going to get some good feedback from you.
You sure are. That's the very least that I can do for you for everything, Peter. Thank you so much for showing up.
My pleasure.
Thank you for sharing your stories. And we're going to wrap it up, man. Thanks. Okay. And on that note, please be safe out there, and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.